What an evocative sound, that whistle. For nearly 50 years, Amtrak's been taking millions of riders across America, myself included, and the president-elect. Joe Biden has been riding the rails since he was a senator in the 1970s. Here is Amtrak Joe, as he's known, at the Wilmington station, which is now named after him. He's campaigned from the train platform in the past, and he might take Amtrak to his inauguration. Amtrak says it wants to work with the Biden administration to get the economy moving. Bill Flynn is the CEO of Amtrak. He joins me now from New York via Skype. Bill, it is good to have you on Questions Business. I mean, Amtrak is about to get a friend, a real friend, in the White House. What would you like to get from the administration?
Well, good afternoon, Richard. And you made a very important point just a moment ago. Amtrak will be celebrating its 50th anniversary here in May in 2021. And we are indeed looking forward to working with the new administration. And I think their set of day one priorities and first 100-day priorities after that, and then the longer term view. We're at the point where vaccines are being approved and vaccines are about to be distributed. And so that's going to be critical for us as we think about our level of ridership and the protection of our employees, that the vaccines indeed are effectively distributed and are available to our employees as the essential workers that they are, and that catalyzes further recovery in ridership. And we also need funding. We have submitted our funding request and increased that request as the COVID pandemic took effect through the course of this year. Right now, we're operating on a continuing resolution, and we have a request for supplemental funding of $2.9 billion for a total of $4.9 billion this year, and that's urgent from our perspective. As we think about the first 100 days of the new administration, we'll need to establish the funding for fiscal year 2022. We operate on a October 1 through September 30 financial year, and we'll be submitting that request in 2020 in February. But the challenge there is we're getting our funding on an annual basis, and in the current Congress, in the House, a new surface transportation bill was offered, and that provided up to $60 billion of funding for Amtrak over the 5-year period. So that longer-term investment in Amtrak and in our infrastructure is key.
Bill, every company, every transportation company is deciding, taking this opportunity, that horrible phrase, don't waste a good crisis, but to decide what their role is in the future. What's Amtrak? What do you see as the future in terms of Amtrak? Is it just niche routes? Is it just the northeast of the United States? Can you build a long-distance route, high-speed rail network? What's the future?
Well, I believe Amtrak's role is essential, and it's not just the Northeast Corridor, Washington to Boston, but I think Washington to Boston points out what indeed Amtrak can be and what Amtrak can contribute to the mobility needs of our country with our intercity passenger rail services. A couple of numbers. The interstate highway system was largely completed in the U.S. Around the middle 90s, 1992. And since then, only about 13% of lane capacity has been added since 1992. Population has grown 28%. Call that 90 million people in that same period of time. But vehicle miles traveled have increased 65%. And you know it yourself if you drive not only within our major urban areas, but between. And think about the congestion between New York and Washington, just by way of example. But you know what? The Amtrak route structure hasn't fundamentally changed since 1971. So from our perspective, there are 25 to 28 metropolitan corridors, for example, where multiple daily train service could provide very much needed intercity transportation at a substantially lower environmental footprint, and one that
can you make that argument? Can you make that argument? Well, you can make that argument. Can you win that argument?
Oh, I believe we can win that argument. I absolutely can make the argument. The company, of course, can. And we have other examples. It's just not Washington to Boston. We've had good growth prior to the pandemic in North Carolina, a route from Raleigh to Charlotte. There's route extension from Richmond into Petersburg. We are looking at services to go from Chicago, increased services from Chicago to Milwaukee, and then on to St. Paul, Minneapolis. There's no effective passenger service between Birmingham and Atlanta, Birmingham and New Orleans, Atlanta and Nashville, and then look at just our West Coast routes. Our second largest corridor, we talked about Washington to Boston, is actually San Diego to Los Angeles and beyond. So there's demand for our services, and those services will meet those needs.
Can I ask you finally, are you preparing a special train to take the president-elect to his inauguration? Come on, you can let me into a secret.
I can't let you into a secret, but if the president's inaugural committee wanted to talk with Amtrak about a special train, we'd be delighted to speak with him, or speak with his team, I should say.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.